As we continue to discuss the ongoing conflict and the developments in the Middle East, specifically between Iran and Israel, I want to also touch on some of the reaction that we're getting from lawmakers regarding the Trump administration's response to this. So to do that, I'd like to bring into the program now Rich Rubino, political analyst and historian. Rich, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
So let's just start with that. What are we hearing from both sides of the aisle, Republicans, Democrats, when it comes to this escalating conflict?
There's a lot of opposition on both the right and the left. If you look at the poll, the recent polls show only 16% of the country believe the United States should directly be involved in the conflict between Iran and Israel. On the conservative side, you have folks like Rand Paul of Kentucky, for example, very much in opposition to this. Also, very many people in the MAGA world, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, and then Congressman Tom Massey has actually introduced a congressional resolution. He's a very conservative or libertarian member of Congress, arguably the most conservative member, which has many Democratic co-sponsors in the United States Senate. A similar or companion measure supported by Virginia Senator Tim Kaine also has a lot of Democrats that are going to be supporting this resolution. So there is opposition on the right and the left, where Trump potentially would have support if there was military action, would be on the interventionist right. Folks like Lindsey Graham, for example, maybe potentially Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, but he's going to see really a flood of opposition from what is very much a war-weary republic. It's interesting because Congress has not declared war since World War II. And I think that there are many members of Congress who believe that the only way that President Trump is constitutionally permissible for him to go into, for him to essentially be involved in this conflict, is for the Congress to actually declare war.
So going back to that, for Congress to actually declare war, I mean, what kind of situation do we have to find ourselves in? You mentioned it wasn't until World War II when that has happened, the last time that that's happened. So
Yeah.
it's been a while. Given how we have seen all of this moving forward, the developments within the last few days, what kind of pressure is there within Congress? How quickly can they come to that decision?
Well, it's actually happened 11 times in our history, certainly at the beginning of the American Republic, all the way through World War II. During the Korean War, President Truman decided to cut, and President Truman and the Americans called that a police action, and that continued through Vietnam, through the Iraq War, certainly through the Gulf War. And you saw this in Kosovo. You saw this in a lot of military actions the United States, Grenada, for example, has employed. But in all cases that Congress authorizes, I mean, Congress can authorize funds to go for the military to fight in wars, but they haven't actually officially declared war. I think there are some in the Congress that believe that the Congress needs to really insert, if you will, their constitutional powers in actually declaring war. So that's what the Constitution actually says. They say the Congress in the past, going back to the Korean War, the Congress has authorized it, allowed the president in some cases, for example, back in 1964, the Congress in the Gulf of Tonkin resolution basically gave President Johnson carte blanche to go to send troops into Vietnam, but he did not have an official congressional declaration of war.
We're taking a live look here out of Tel Aviv in Israel. Rich, I do want to segue, though, and talk about the big, beautiful bill, because we're still talking about it here. Later on today, we are expecting some Senate Democrats to hold a press conference. Where do we stand with this whole situation?
Well, it appears that Senator Mike Crapo, who's the senator from Idaho, chairman of the Finance Committee, is going to be is basically writing with this, what will be the Senate companion version of the bill. You still have some opposition. Basically, for Donald Trump, he needs 50 votes because it's going to be reconciliation, meaning that you need 50 votes, not 60 votes, which is what you normally need for a congressional for something to go through the United States Senate. But Donald Trump, it looks like, since he's likely going to have universal opposition from the Democratic Party, he can only lose 3 votes. And who are those potential votes? So Rand Paul, Donald Trump has said, is probably the hardest person to get. Rand Paul is very much a libertarian. Rand Paul is someone who's very much opposed to raising the debt limit, for example. And then you have someone like Ron Johnson, who's been very much excoriating this piece of proposed legislation so far. He's a potential no. And then you have Susan Collins from Maine, who's up for re-election in a state where Donald Trump lost relatively handily last time around. It may be in her political best interest to oppose it, to oppose the legislation. But that being said, she could also potentially have a primary challenger if she does, and somebody that Donald Trump could potentially fund, somebody who maybe could beat Susan Collins in the primary, and then that person would lose in the general election. Susan Collins is also the chairwoman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. And then you have Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who's wants to, I think, really exhibit moderate bona fides in a state that's very much a swing state, and he's up for re-election next time. So Donald Trump really has his proverbial work cut out for him here.
All right, Rubino, political analyst and historian. Always good to see you. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday here at Live Now from Fox. Lots to talk about, lots to get
Yeah.
to, but we'll be checking in soon.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
Of course.